What's going on? YouTube, listen up, young elder gang. This is Shalonda Lewis at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes in this video. You will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning. The truth, keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang, hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. The war was over. The thunder of guns faded into memory, and the fields where soldiers once clashed now lay eerily quiet. The cannons fell silent, but peace did not follow. Instead, a heavy silence settled over the land, filled with uncertainty and fear. 4 million newly freed people stepped into a world that promised freedom, but delivered only uncertainty. Their first steps were hesitant, shadowed by the unknown. The land was scarred, the air heavy with old hatreds and new betrayals. Burned homes and shattered towns bore silent witness to the cost of war. Freedom was a word spoken in distant halls, but on Southern soil it felt hollow. In the corridors of power, promises were made, but on the ground, hope was fragile. The old masters still owned the land, the law, and the power. Their grip on the South remained strong, their influence shaping every aspect of life. The poison of supremacy lingered, threatening to swallow the fragile hope of a new beginning. Old prejudices refused to die, infecting every interaction. Families searched for each other, built churches and schools, and dreamed of land to call their own. They clung to hope, forging new communities from the ashes. But everywhere, cold eyes watched, and resentment simmered. Every step forward was met with suspicion, every dream shadowed by hostility. The end of the Civil War was not the end of struggle. It was the start of a new, more sinister chapter. The fight for true freedom had only just begun. Physical chains were broken, but invisible ones were already being forged. Laws and customs rose up to replace the shackles, binding lives in new ways. The nation was stitched back together, but the wound festered. Unity was fragile, and beneath the surface, anger and pain refused to heal. The dream of a new South, equal and just, began to feel like a ghost story. Hopes flickered in the darkness, but fear and doubt crept in. The silence was not peace, it was the calm before a storm. Tension hung in the air, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The shadow of oppression was falling once again. The promise of freedom was threatened, and the struggle for justice was far from over. Out of the gloom that had settled over a fractured nation, a single ray of hope appeared, one that shimmered with the possibility of real change. This hope was the 15th Amendment, a bold declaration in a time of uncertainty. It declared in words etched for eternity that the right to vote could not be denied by race, color, or previous servitude. For millions who had been silenced, these words were a promise of belonging. For the first time in American history, Black men were recognized as citizens with a voice, no longer invisible but seen and heard at the ballot box. The ballot became more than paper. It was a shield against oppression, a sword to fight injustice, and a key unlocking the doors to liberty and self-determination. With the vote, Black communities could finally elect leaders who would protect, represent, and uplift them. Leaders who understood their struggles and dreams. The amendment was meant to be the cornerstone of a new, just society, a foundation on which equality and freedom could be built for generations to come. But a promise, no matter how noble, is only as strong as the will to keep it alive. Doubt and resistance lingered in the shadows. As the amendment traveled south, it met a wall of fury and defiance. Old prejudices did not vanish overnight. To the old order, this was not hope. It was humiliation, a bitter pill that threatened their way of life and power. The very idea of former slaves voting, holding office, and shaping laws was intolerable to many who clung to the past. Even as the ink dried on the amendment, plans to undermine its promise were already underway, schemes whispered in back rooms and plotted in secret. The promise of freedom was about to be tested by violence, intimidation, and hate. The road ahead would be long and perilous. Yet, despite the danger, Black Americans pressed forward. The struggle for true citizenship, dignity, and equality had only just begun. The battle lines were drawn, and the fight for justice would echo through generations. For a brief moment in history, the promise of the 15th Amendment blossomed, offering a glimmer of hope and equality. During the era of Reconstruction, Black men surged to the polls, voting with a newfound sense of purpose and immense courage. They risked their lives to cast ballots, bravely building a new world with every vote they cast, despite the looming threats. Black leaders were elected as mayors, sheriffs, legislators, even U.S. senators, marking a significant shift in political power. Reconstruction governments, a coalition of Black and white Republicans, brought public schools and fairer laws, striving for justice. It was a radical experiment in interracial democracy, a bold attempt to redefine societal norms. For a fleeting time, the South seemed to be transforming, embracing change and progress. But every step forward was met with furious resistance, as old prejudices refused to die. The old guard saw Black empowerment as a perversion of the natural order, a threat to their long-held dominance. They organized in the shadows, plotting to reclaim power through any means necessary. The dawn of Black political power was tragically short-lived, as the forces of oppression regrouped. A violent backlash was brewing, ready to extinguish this new hope and return to the old ways. The dream of a new South was slipping away, as fear and violence took hold. The forces of reaction were gathering strength, determined to crush the progress made. The storm was about to break, threatening to undo the fragile gains of Reconstruction. The storm broke with a campaign of terror. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan and White League unleashed violence to crush Black voters and overthrow Reconstruction. They targeted Black leaders, burned schools and churches, and attacked anyone supporting progress. This was systematic political warfare, terror written in blood and fire. As the North grew weary, federal protection faded. The Compromise of 1877 withdrew the last troops, leaving Black citizens defenseless. White supremacist redeemers swept back into power. They rewrote laws, enacting poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses to disenfranchise Black voters. The 15th Amendment was strangled by legal and violent means. The promise of freedom was buried under a new regime of oppression. The darkness descended once more. The betrayal ran deeper than stolen votes. The Reconstruction amendments were twisted into tools of control. The 13th Amendment's exception for crime allowed states to criminalize Black life and re-enslave through convict leasing. The 14th Amendment shifted power to the federal government, making rights conditional and citizenship a tool of control. Freedmen became wards of the state, their freedom dependent on federal whim. When the government looked away, they were left defenseless. Paper chains, poll taxes, literacy tests, vagrancy laws replaced iron ones. The system kept Black people as a permanent, controllable labor force. Convict leasing provided cheap, forced labor, enriching the state and private companies. The grand promises of freedom became a legal cage. True independence was replaced by a new kind of dependency. The hope of Reconstruction was betrayed by the very laws meant to protect it. Servitude continued, not to a person, but to a system. Who truly controlled this new system? The Civil War left the nation in debt to powerful international bankers. These financiers pushed for a strong, centralized government they could influence. The national debt became leverage for their interests. A cheap, powerless labor force in the South served both Northern industry and global finance. Southern redeemers and Northern industrialists worked together, profiting from Black oppression. The reunion of North and South was a business deal, not a moral victory. Foreign bankers shaped policy to serve their interests, not justice. Freedmen were pawns in a global game of power and profit. Their freedom was sold to the highest bidder. In 1871, Congress created a new corporate entity, the United States. The 14th Amendment made everyone a citizen of this corporation, not the original republic. Power now flowed from the top down, with people as assets, not sovereign citizens. This structure suited international bankers, who valued contracts and debt over rights. For Black Americans, this was the ultimate betrayal. Promised inclusion in a republic, they became subjects of a corporation. Their labor and citizenship became collateral for national debt. Convict leasing and sharecropping extracted wealth to pay the corporation's creditors. The federal government abandoned Black citizens for profit. Protecting their rights was bad for business. The fight was never about morality. It was about the bottom line. The citizenship granted by the 14th Amendment was an illusion. It offered responsibilities, but not true rights, especially for Black Americans. Trapped between oppressive states and an indifferent federal corporation, they were left powerless. The narrative blamed Black people for their own oppression, ignoring state-sponsored terror and economic exploitation. The courts dismantled Reconstruction protections, upholding segregation and discrimination. Institutions meant to defend the Constitution became tools for subverting it. Black Americans were promised a voice, only to have it silenced. The hope of Reconstruction curdled into the despair of Jim Crow. The fight was now for the very meaning of freedom and citizenship. The promise of equality was revealed as a ghost. The struggle for justice continued. The darkness after Reconstruction lasted nearly a century. Only the civil rights movement of the 1960s began to restore the promises of the 14th and 15th Amendments. The fight for voting rights is a testament to unyielding spirit. Yet the same forces of disenfranchisement persist today, through voter suppression and corporate influence. The system still serves the powerful, not the people. The battle for a government truly by and for the people remains. The illusion of citizenship is a present danger. The legacy of the 15th Amendment is a promise betrayed, still waiting to be redeemed. Freedom is never permanently won. It must be fought for by every generation. Remembering the past gives us strength to keep fighting for the light.